right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D and D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition D&D to help you get the most out of your choices. So today, I mentioned this in my Tasha's Culture and Everything review. We're going to start going over the optional class features that were introduced into Tasha's. And the first one we're doing is the Ranger. If you've watched my Ranger videos before, you know that I've mentioned that the PHB Ranger, the Player's Handbook Ranger, is broken. Everything they can do, another class can do better. And the few things that are unique to the Ranger are generally pointless. So a while back, Wizards of the Coast released an Unearthed Arcana that was called the Revised Ranger, and they basically rewrote the Ranger. And but personally, I liked it. I thought it was really well designed. And fixed a lot of the issues with the Ranger. The issue with the Revised Ranger was the new subclasses that were introduced with Xanathar's Guide completely clashed with the Revised Ranger to the point where if you were to use the Revised Ranger with those subclasses, they would be completely overpowered, unlike the regular Ranger, which is underpowered, because Xanathar's took steps to fixing some of the issues through subclasses. So Tasha's has basically come up with a bit of a happy medium between the two to make it a little bit more balanced, but to fix a lot of the issues that the original PHB Ranger had. So, just to give you a quick refresher on 5th edition class design, like I always do, every class should play very, very differently. It's one of the issues with the Ranger. It doesn't play differently. There are fighters that will play exactly like the Ranger. There are half-casters like Paladins that will play exactly like the Ranger. But each class is supposed to play very, very differently, and the defining features of that class should show up with the first two levels. Because most of these features replace features from the original Ranger, I'm actually going to be comparing them with the original features to talk how they fix certain problems and things like that, and how you could best use those. Not every single optional feature is a replacement. One of them, like the expanded spell list, is literally just that. It doesn't replace the old spell list, it just adds more spells. So in those features, I won't have something to compare to. But for everything else, I am going to show whether it's superior to the PHP version, whether it's worse than that, and tell you how you can implement it in your own play as successfully as possible. So, yeah, the defining features of the Ranger. Normally, when if we do a little history of the Ranger, going all the way back to this is 2nd edition where it first showed up, the Ranger was always designed to be this like really powerful nature-based hunter, and they did that in a couple ways. Most Rangers would get access to some nature-based spells, which originally were divine spells that had like a nature theme, and then eventually you would actually have nature spells that things like druids would use. But they're always defined to be a nature-based weapon for a fighter, basically kind of a nature version of a paladin. But the thing that kind of differentiated them from a paladin, whereas a paladin devotes themselves to a deity and goes out to enforce the deity's will, the ranger doesn't dedicate themselves to a deity or even to nature. They live in nature, and because of that, they're influenced by it and learn to wield it to do their chosen profession, which is to hunt. Now, whether those are creatures for food, or whether it is bounty hunting, or hunting dangerous monsters to protect people, rangers have always been about the idea that they are part of nature and therefore will protect it, not quite in the same way like a druid would. And they will use their natural abilities to increase their proficiency in hunting and finding very specific prey. And for those prey that they're very good at finding, they are unmatched in their ability to hunt them, track them, and kill them. So that's what the Ranger was supposed to be in 5th edition. This is not really what it turned into. And we'll talk about, because the interesting thing about this, remember how I said for 5th edition class design, you put the defining features in the first 2 levels. Everything a ranger gets in the first 2 levels has an optional feature to replace it. So quite literally, we are going to be, with these optional features, we will be redefining what a ranger is by giving them brand new defining features, which I find exciting because the ranger needs it. Don't get me wrong, I have a ranger. I played them from I think like 3rd level all the way up to 10th in the Adventures League, and I love playing them, but I had to really know the ranger really well to just be kind of passable compared to the other people at the table who were playing more just traditionally balanced classes. And a lot of the fun I had from playing my ranger was done through role playing and had nothing to do with the actual features of the class itself. I made my own fun for that. So don't get me wrong, I like rangers. I just think they need a fix so that you don't have to be like me to be able to have fun with them. Anyone can pick up a ranger and play. So let's dive into it and see exactly what they did to do to try and make the ranger just more playable. So at first level, the ranger gets to 2 abilities. The regular ranger does. They get favorite enemy and then a natural explorer. Tasha replaces has the option to replace both of those with different abilities. The first one listed into the Tasha's is Deft Explorer, which replaces the Natural Explorer feature. So what is a Natural Explorer? Effectively, and this is something that actually goes back through the systems for Rangers, is you actually get to pick a favored terrain. This is the type of nature that you grew up in, that you trained in, that is kind of infused itself into you. In previous editions, it was a little bit more of a role-playing feature than it was like a combat mechanics feature. And they kind of did this as the same thing here, but it's even less useful than it has been in previous editions. Effectively, what Natural Explorer lets you do, difficult terrain doesn't slow group to travel. Doesn't have anything to do with actually in combat. Your Natural Explorer won't help you at all. But group travel, which a lot of DMs don't bother with the group travel rules, it makes it so difficult to terrain won't slow you down in group travel, which is something you also don't get a ton of in group travel anyways. Difficult terrain tends to be a little bit more like battle maps and stuff than large areas where you go, oh, this is difficult terrain. Group can't become lost except by magical means, which really all you need to do that is a decent survival skill, which anyone can have, or even just a decent wisdom score, which a lot of classes can have. Even when you're engaged in other activity while traveling, such as foraging, navigating, or tracking, you remain alert to danger. Again, a rule that most DMs don't actually use. If you're traveling alone, you can move stealthily at a normal pace. Again, stealth travel, especially for a team-based game, giving them a benefit to traveling alone doesn't really help unless you're encouraging them to split the party. When you forage, you find twice as much food. Again, not really that useful since most parties just carry rations with them. Um, and foraging itself, like everyone can just go out and forage their own food. You being able to forage enough for two people instead of one doesn't do that much. And then when tracking other creatures, you also learn their exact number, their sizes, and how long ago they passed through the area. Again, not that useful. Now, I've said before, knowledge is power in 5th edition. Knowing the exact number of creatures instead of there's a lot of them doesn't make a huge benefit. Also, neither does their sizes. If you recognize a displacer beast to track, which is something you should be able to do. Animals make you unique to tracks. Even animals of the same species can sometimes make different tracks that a good enough tracker would be able to differentiate. Being able to know their sizes and their exact numbers isn't changing anything. Wow, we know that there's displacer beast tracks, and there's enough here that it's obviously more than one. Well, if you have 2 or 5 displacer beasts, there's not a huge difference there, beside the fact that you'll be fighting more. And if they're really big displacer beasts or really small ones, it doesn't really change much. And how long ago they passed through the area, again, isn't that big a deal. So everything within a natural explorer is limited in itself, but it's limited to your favored terrain. So that means, let's say your favorite terrain is desert. You're a desert ranger, but this particular adventure is taking place in a forest. Natural Explorer is completely worthless to you. Now, at 6th and to 10th levels, you do get to pick another favorite terrain. But that still means by 10th level, there are only 3 areas where this stuff could become useful. And if you're never doing long distance to travel in those areas, Natural Explorer is a complete waste of time. Now, when we go to Deft Explorer, it changes things drastically. First of all, none of this is limited to your quote-unquote favored terrain. This is all stuff that just happens. And the first thing you get at level 1, and that's the other thing, is instead of having just a feature you get at level 1 and then adding more uses of the feature effectively at 6 and 10, you get an ability at level 1, an ability at level 6, and an ability at level 10. So this actually changes things rather drastically from the Natural Explorer. The first thing you get at first level with Deft Explorer is what's called Canny. Canny is expertise. Your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses a chosen skill, and you choose one of your skill proficiencies. So you are limited to skills that you are proficient in, but using a combination of backgrounds where you literally can get any skill you want, proficiency in any skill you want, depending on the background you choose, and other things like the humans to trait where they get an extra skill proficiency, or if you use the new customized origin, you can choose this as a skill proficiency with that. It really means you can choose whatever you want. With Canny, you get to add double your skill proficiency to that, which is a big deal. Before, you would get things like advantage, and mechanically and statistically, adding advantage to a roll is effectively adding plus 3.5 to the roll. Adding disadvantage is subtracting the 3.5 from the roll from a statistical perspective. That's how much it changes. With expertise, at first level, when you would get this, or Canny in this particular case, at first level when you would get this, you get to add 4 to your Canny skill. By the time you get to a +6 proficiency, you're adding +12 to that ability. So Canny is significantly more useful than um, advantage, and you can add advantage onto that for a lot of different reasons. Whereas if you have advantage, you can't get double advantage or anything. So Canny turns that into significantly better. Now, if you want to keep with the more traditional ranger, you can choose survival or maybe investigation to say that, well, I'm a ranger, I'm really good at tracking, or I have really acute senses, so when I'm searching for something using investigation, I'm much better at it. Or you could even do a perception. Go, I just, from living in the wild, I just have a naturally higher perception because I constantly have to be aware of predators around me. So you can go that. However, you can just as easily to say, you know what, I'm going to choose athletics because living in the wild and growing up in the wild, I learned to be very self-sufficient. So I learned to lift heavy logs and the things like that were blocking my path. Or you could choose one of the charisma skills, like persuasion, where you can go, well, you know what? From living in the wild, anytime I had to get something that I couldn't hunt myself, I had to not only negotiate with whoever was out there, but I had to succeed, because if it was a life and death of a thing, like maybe I needed an anti-venom and I didn't have the ability to make one myself, I've got to get that or I'm going to be severely hurt or dead. So you very easily can justify really any skill and still be a very traditional ranger and do a lot of cool things. So I like Canny. I like that it's first level. I like that it's one skill. Expertise is a rogue and bard thing. Traditionally, it's generally a bard thing, and the rogues got it this time because it kind of made sense with their class kit. But I don't want to see things taken away from or given to another class that kind of define a different class. And expertise really does kind of define both the bard and the rogue. So I like that it's just one. It still gives you a feeling that you're special, and you can use it to customize the ranger to be the kind of ranger you want. But it's not going to be so broken that you start stepping on other classes' toes. At 6th level, you get roving. Roving increases your walking speed by 5, and you get a climbing speed and swimming speed equal to your walking speed. Now, that doesn't sound too impressive until you start to realize just how useful it is. Most people, the only speed they could care about is your walking speed, because that's how far you can move in combat, and if you have a flying speed, because flying speed does change things a lot, and if you have the hover ability with your flying speed, because that decides whether you have to land at the end of your turn or if you can just float in the air. And that's what most players could care about. They don't care about swimming speeds. They don't care about climbing speeds. Those are really, really useful, and they fit the idea of a ranger really well. Climbing is something that you do generally to get past natural obstacles. There's a mountain in your way. There's you need to get a better vantage point, so you climb into a tree. It's a very natural based way to get around problems. And having a climbing speed means you don't have to make your athletics checks to be able to make your climbs. You just have a climbing speed. You can just do it. In combat, having a climbing speed effectively allows you to turn a 2-dimensional combat 3-dimensional, as long as there are things to climb on and platforms to rest on to make your attacks from. For a bow ranger, a climbing speed can be unbelievably useful, because you can get to places where melee fighters can't attack you, but you can rain down hell on them from above. So climbing speed, super good, really fits with a ranger. Swimming speed, most people don't care about swimming speed because it's used so infrequently in most campaigns. But there's a huge caveat to swimming speed, and that is underwater attacks. Most DMs either don't know the underwater combat rules or use them so frequently that they forget them most of the time. And a caveat to underwater combat that everyone seems to forget is everyone thinks underwater combat, all of your attacks are made with disadvantage, which is true, other than two conditions. If you are using a piercing weapon, like a spear or a dagger, no disadvantage is made because it can go through the water and it doesn't get the immense drag that a chopping weapon or a blunt weapon would. The other way you can avoid having disadvantage on all your attack rolls is by having a swimming speed. Simply by having a swimming speed, you don't get disadvantage on attack rolls. This is a huge boon for melee rangers, which I've mentioned before. Melee rangers or dual wield rangers get a pretty bunk roll of it in 5th edition because almost all the spells that rangers can cast are primarily focused on bow rangers and have little to no use for melee rangers. Most of the class features either require bonus actions, which removes their ability to make their offhand attack, or don't apply when you're using multiple attacks or things like that. So they just don't really work that well. However, swimming speed actually benefits a melee ranger if you're doing any sort of underwater combat, which I think is a huge area of 5th edition D&D that we just ignore, despite the fact that they have tons of ways for you to add underwater combat to your adventures. And searching an underwater city or dealing with a building or something that's being flooded and having to make your way out while fighting monsters, like that's a really cool thing to do. So this simply makes, again, rangers work better in nature in general, to the point where they naturally can fight underwater where no other class can. Every other class will need some sort of magic item or magic spell in order to give them that ability. So I really like that. And extra speed is always just useful no matter where you are in 5th edition. 10th level, as part of this Deft Explorer, they get Tireless. As an action, you can give yourself a number of temporary hit points equal to 1d8 plus your Wisdom modifier. You can use this action number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. In addition, whenever you finish a short rest, your exhaustion level, if any, decreases by 1. So we'll take the first at first. Temporary hit points, always useful. They basically act as a shield. And it does fit with the idea of a ranger kind of growing up solitarily and being on their own and having to kind of protect their own. They can kind of use their own wisdom, their own knowledge and insight and will power effectively to kind of create a buffer against everything out that they're trying to stop them. To me, this almost feels like they just have this kind of indomitable will to survive, and it manifests as them being able to give themselves the temporary hit points. The exhaustion thing, I've mentioned in previous videos, I think exhaustion is one of the most underutilized abilities or the detriments in 5th edition, because when you get to higher levels, exhaustion can actually change combat massively and can make things seem that much more dangerous. Once you get to the tier 3 in 5th edition, which is 11 to 16th level, making the lose condition of any encounter or storyline or something is you all have to die, generally makes creating situations where your party actually feels like they're in danger really hard, because invariably you will have someone that has healing abilities, so that they can help not only keep people alive, but they can resurrect people when they need it. You're going to have someone in the party that is just built to take the damage. And that person is going to be super, super hard to kill. And they're going to do everything in their power to make sure they're the ones that are getting attacked. So when you get to tier 3 and especially to tier 4, adding creatures that can inflict levels of exhaustion changes things immensely. What can just be a war of attrition that the party is always going to win because they're built to be able to withstand multiple combat encounters, while monsters are built to only exist in a single encounter. The players will always win a war of attrition over hit points or damage dealing or anything like that, unless it is a massive imbalance. However, once you start adding exhaustion, first level exhaustion doesn't really affect combat that much. It gives you disadvantage on ability checks, but not saving throws or anything like that. Once you get to the second level, though, your speed is halved. That massively changes how the game is played. Third, disadvantage on all attack rolls and saving throws. At that point, you have just massively shifted the balance of a fight with just 3 levels of exhaustion. When players start seeing levels of exhaustion appearing, they change their tactics. They play much more tactically. They're much more careful. They're much more intuitive when they're playing, because they can take a bunch of hit point damage. Even if they die, they've got someone in the party that can revivify or raise the dead. They can go pay for it. Death is really not that big a deal for tier 3 into the tier 4 parties. But exhaustion is. Because exhaustion only goes away 1 level per long rest or 1 level per greater restoration. And it can affect your character a lot longer than death will. And can lead... exhaustion will lead to TPKs a lot quicker than just massive amounts of damage. So with the Ranger, now, again, this idea that they're built of hardier stock because they live in the wilderness and probably have dealt with exhaustion a lot, they can recover from exhaustion faster. So in those situations where you're throwing exhaustion abilities at your players, the Ranger can kind of dive into the front and take the kind of meat shield position, because they can go, you know what, I can take more exhaustion than the rest of the party, because all I need is a short rest to decrease my level, instead of everyone else who needs a long rest and can only get one of those per day and things like that. So, yeah, I really, really love that. One thing I forgot to mention about canny at first level, in addition to the double your proficiency bonus, you also learn to speak, read, and write to the 2 additional languages, which again is always useful. I'm a huge fan of using languages often in 5th edition, because there's tons of them there. And in the real world, we have people that speak, a dozen languages. There's some people that do that. And even aside from the U.S., most of the world is at least bilingual. Being able to create a little bit of conflict by having a language barrier can be a lot of fun and create some interesting encounters. So, yeah, so that is Deft Explorer, which replaces Natural Explorer. And I really don't think there's a comparison here. Deft Explorer is just a better version of Natural Explorer. It takes away the chosen to terrain thing, which again was part of being a Ranger. But in 5th edition, they didn't do anything that really rewarded you for choosing a terrain type. So I would have to say Deft Explorer is just better. Going to the next one, and this might be a little long video because this is pretty technical, is Favored Foe, which replaces Favored Enemy. Now, Favored Enemy was the other thing that was defining for a Ranger from its inception. In earlier editions, when you picked your favorite enemy, you actually got a damage bonus against that particular type of enemy. And then there'd be additional stuff, like sometimes they were easier to track, or Sometimes you'd get additional benefits when you're dealing with them. So favorite enemy was a really important part of the Ranger. And it kind of came as a double-edged sword because when you were fighting one of your favorite enemies, you were vastly superior to any other weapon-based fighter or weapon-based character because you could just do more damage. You were specifically skilled to be able to fight those creatures. When you weren't facing a favorite enemy, you were less useful than most other fighters. Not by a huge amount, but you were definitely on the low end of the totem pole there. And that balance of sometimes it being good, sometimes being bad was enough for most people to just kind of accept, I like this. And as you leveled up, you would get multiple favorite enemies to kind of make it to the point where on average you were doing better. You were more often getting bonuses than you were just being less useful because all of your abilities were based around the idea that you could have a favorite enemy. 5th edition, none of that happened. 5th edition, you would choose a type of favorite enemy, which is very common, and all they would give you is advantage on wisdom survival checks to track it, and on intelligence checks to recall information about them, and you'd learn an additional language. Doesn't really help. Mostly because, again, advantage on wisdom survival adds 3.5 to the roll statistically. There are so many other ways you can get an extra 3.5 to your roll. There's a good chance your cleric will be able to make better survival checks than your ranger because the ranger will focus on their dexterity because damage is the only thing they've got going for them, and their ranger spells really don't have a lot of saves, and clerics are entirely wisdom based. Survival checks doesn't help. Intelligence to recall of information, most rangers don't have a decent intelligence as a score, so adding 3.5 to a 0 or a negative as a score ain't really doing much. You're still failing a lot. And that was all you got for this defining feature of the Ranger. And that was one of the big issues with the Ranger is both the first level of abilities had no mechanical benefit, no combat benefit. They were both role-playing abilities and weak ones that were extremely situational. So the things that define the Ranger were that the Ranger was an extremely situational role-playing based class. And that was it. At least at level 1. We'll get into level 2 in a second. Favored foe changes things, but not in a great way. Favored foe, when you hit a creature with an attack roll, you can call on your mystical bond with nature to mark the target as your favorite enemy for a minute or until you lose concentration, as if you were concentrating on a spell. First time the first time on each of your turns that you hit the favorite enemy and deal the damage to it, including when you mark it, you increase the damage by d4, and you can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, get all of them back when you finish a long rest, and it gets more powerful as you level up. A d6 at 6th, a d8 at 14th. Oh, this had a promise. Another defining feature of the Ranger that we'll talk about in a second here when we talk about the spells, but we have to talk about it now too, since this is kind of trying to replace it, is Hunter's Mark. Hunter's Mark is a spell that is exclusive to Rangers and Vengeance Paladins. Which, don't get me wrong, I like having it. I have a Vengeance Paladin. It's cool. But they say that it's a defining feature of the Ranger, and it's not even something that only a Ranger can take. But Vengeance Paladins are the only other class that ever gets Hunter's Mark. Everyone else can just take a level in the Magic Initiate feat, take Warlock, and they get Hex, which does the exact same thing except better. But we're going to ignore that for right now. Hunter's Mark was designed to be one of the defining features of the Ranger because it allowed them to just do extra damage on a target they designated, which is a very Hunter-ish type thing. You go, you're my target. Boom, 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 boom. I'm going to destroy you. The way it worked is it's a concentration spell, which caused a lot of issues. And what it would do is you mark the target, and every weapon attack you make deals an additional d6 of damage. This is one of the few spells the ranger has that actually benefits a melee fighter, because every attack you do, you get extra damage. So your offhand attack is going to do extra damage as well. The downside to that, being you would whoa, wow, brain just went. You would have to use a bonus action to Hunter's Mark the target, which that turn you would lose your offhanded attack. And then it lasts for a minute. If you kill your target before the minute's up, you could switch it to another target for another bonus action. So for a bunch of small enemies that were killed with just one turn, it wasn't really worth it. But anytime you were attacking at least 2 or the 3 turns on the same target, it was really, really helping. Favored Foe, which replaces favorite enemy, which we've already talked about, was completely worthless. All it does is it allows you to mark a single target until it dies. You don't get to move the mark. It's still a concentration spell, so you can't combine it with Hunter's Mark, or probably about 3/4 of the Hunter's spells that are actually useful require concentration. Entangling Strike, I think, is what it's called. Hunter's Mark, obviously. Quick Quiver, anything like that. Like you just can't use any of them with this because it'll break your concentration. So that in itself is a problem. The other thing, the first time on each of your turns, that actually limits 2 different ways. The first time means you can only do it once per turn, and a D4 damage isn't going to change almost anything. At 14th level, a D8 of damage once per turn isn't going to change anything. The other thing that makes this an even more limited ability is it's the first time on each of your turns. There's an interesting little bit of wordplay in the Rogue's sneak attack feature where it says once per turn you can apply sneak attack damage. Didn't say once per your turn. It says once per turn. So rogues, if they can get an opportunity attack or get an attack some other way, using their reaction when it's not their turn, they can actually sneak attack twice per round, because it's a different turn as soon as someone else starts acting. This limits it completely to only once per round, and it has to be on your turn. That is hugely limiting. And then we limit it even more by you can only use it a number of times equal your proficiency bonus, and you only get them back on a long rest. So when you first get this ability, you can use it twice per day. As a comparison, at 2nd level, when you would get Hunter's Mark for the Ranger, you have 2 first level spell slots. So you can only use it, Hunter's Mark, twice per day, but you can use it on as many enemies as you can mark in a minute. So if you're going through enemies really quick, you can get 3-4 uses out of a single Hunter's Mark. Whereas this is 2 enemies per day you can do slightly more damage to. And while you're doing that damage, you can't use any concentration spells. The majority of your spellcasting feature is not available to you while you're using Favored Foe. That, to me, is a huge misstep. I've said before, I don't think Hunter's Mark should be a spell. I think it should be a class feature. And you should have limited uses of it, just like any other class feature, any other powerful class feature, like divine, or to channel divinity, the things like that. I think if that is what they had done and just removed Hunter's Mark from the Hunter's spell list and replaced it with a favored foe, that would be so much better, and I would be super, super happy. They didn't. They created a vastly inferior version of Hunter's Mark that you can't combine with Hunter's Mark, and does almost nothing to make the Ranger more viable in combat. Again, an extra D4 isn't going to change almost anything all the way up to level 6. From 6th level to 14th level, doing an extra D6 of damage once per turn doesn't change anything. The monsters have high enough of hit points. You're not even going to remove having to make an additional attack to kill something at that point. You're just going to have to waste half a round of attacks, since they'll have an extra attack by that point, instead of a full round of attacks against a creature. So maybe you're saving one attack by adding an extra D6 once per turn. It's just wow. The only kind of nice thing about a favored foe is the fact that it says anytime you deal damage to it. So this is not limited to weapon attacks. If you have an attacking spell or something like that, anything else that causes you to do damage, you can still use favored foe in its incredibly limited capacity. Now, one thing it does say with favored foe is it does work with the Foe Slayer feature, which is a 20th level ability for Rangers, which is normally once on each of your turns, you can add your Wisdom modifier to the attack roll or to the damage roll of an attack you make against one of your favored enemies. So since they're taking favorite enemies away, Foe Slayer gets that. So at level to 20, you get to add even more damage once per turn. A maximum of 5 damage or a maximum of +5 to your attack roll. That's it. And that's a 20th level ability. 20th level abilities should be kind of broken. That's so underpowered and so useless. So overall, I'm not happy with a favored foe. There isn't a situation other than you are level 1 and don't have access to Hunter's Mark where favored foe is ever going to be more useful or even as useful as Hunter's Mark. It is always going to be a lesser form of Hunter's Mark that doesn't really help you. Were I to make some changes to this so it would be absolutely useful, the one thing that the other thing that's actually useful about it, it doesn't use your bonus action. So this is, again, another one of the few abilities that actually benefits dual-wielding rogues. A dual wielder normally has to give up their offhand action to use their Hunter's Mark, where with this, you can use that offhand attack and still get your attack in while still marking your foe. So that's a nice thing. So if I was to modify this and to turn it into something that's actually useful as a way to replace a favorite enemy with something that makes you feel powerful, first things first, you can move the mark. For a minute, whenever you hit a creature, you can mark it. Hitting you can't do it if your mark is already active on another target. So you can't just bounce between creatures and mark everyone you hit. You have to kill one, move to the next. But for a minute, you can just move it anytime you hit with an attack. It's no longer a concentration spell. Because of that, I think limiting it to once per turn still makes sense, because now instead of replacing Hunter's Mark, it's going to augment Hunter's Mark, which actually makes it useful. So I'm actually fine with it just being a once per turn thing. Now again, once per turn, not once per your turn, so that you can actually use it with Battle Master for fighters and other things like that, where you might get an extra attack. And then, then we can leave it to number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, get it on a long rest, and it increases in damage at 6th and 14th level. That would make it actually useful, because then you would have a choice. Is it in my best interest to Hunter's Mark and remove a spell slot that I could use for the additional ranger spells we're about to talk about? Or is it better for me to just use Favored Foe for right now and to do it that way? I realize that this takes away a little bit of the idea of this is my one true killer and I will only... But it doesn't really, as long as that emphasis of if another creature is alive that's marked by this, you can't move the mark, but as soon as they die, you can move the mark by attacking a different creature. This becomes an actual useful feature. It's something specific to the ranger. It defines the ranger in that they can just kind of go into a point where they get really good at focus firing down a single enemy and then moving on to the next one, which fits with the idea of a ranger focusing down on their particular target and then moving on. And it actually makes it fun to play. You actually feel good when you use this, as opposed to now, where it's just like, well, now I don't get to use Hunter's Mark, and I'm not going to do much to the damage, and it feels like a punishment rather than a benefit. Favored Foe, not a fan of how it's written. A few changes, and it turns into a really useful ability. So if I was to allow a Favored Foe in my campaign, I would make those changes, because it's just not worth it otherwise. And I would almost say Favored Enemy is more useful, because it doesn't stop you from using a defining feature of the hunter, or the ranger, which is Hunter's Mark. Second ranger, second level features, they actually have two different ones. Spellcasting and fighting style options. Both of these are additional things where they don't replace anything, they just add more, and I like both of them. The additional ranger spells, only 3 of them are new spells from Tasha's guide. The rest are just spells that I really think rangers should have had access to already, because they just fit. The new spells are the new summon spells. I mentioned in my review video, I like the summon spells, because instead of just picking a monster stat block and having it fight on your side for a little bit, which is not how monster stat blocks were designed. They were not designed to be used by a player character. They were designed to fight players. So adding them to the other side doesn't really work that well. These summon, they have the 3 of them: Summon Beast, Summon Face, Summon Elemental. And what they do is when you summon it, you get to pick a flavor of summoning. For like Summon Elemental, you choose Air, Earth, Fire, or Water. And then that gives you a brand new stat block that is specifically being designed for use as a summon creature. Unlike the other ones, which were designed to be used as creatures that had their own initiative, their own attacks, their own actions, and then you had to kind of cripple them so that you weren't unbalancing the game by giving the one side a significant advantage. These summon spells are specifically designed to deal with the fact that you're now adding extra actions, and they work pretty well. And they fit with the idea of a nature-based fighter being able to call in some help to help them fight. But the rest of the stuff on here is really useful. Things like Searing Smite. The ability for a ranger to ignite their weapon on fire and then ignite their enemy when they hit them is a totally useful ability. Now, Searing Smite is concentration, as are all Smite spells, meaning if you are using Favored Foe or Hunter's Mark, you have to cancel it to use Searing Smite, which only lasts, you use a bonus action to cast Searing Smite, and it only lasts until you hit an enemy and do damage to it. So Searing Smite with Favored Foe as it is right now, completely useless. You can't use it, and you're always going to want to use Hunter's Mark over Searing Smite because they're both first level spells. But we fix Foe Hunter the way I did. You actually get to use Searing Smite. Second level, you have really useful things like Enhance Ability makes perfect sense for a ranger to have. They can sit there and use nature magic to get someone else as good at doing nature kind of stuff as they are. Gust of Wind just seems like a nature thing. They could make wind blow. You know, it's cool. Magic Weapon, super useful. Something that's actually useful for melee rangers. The only issue with Magic Weapon is you can only cast it on one weapon, and it's concentration. So if you're dual weapon fighting, only one of your weapons is going to turn magic, but it's still useful. It adds a +1 to attack and damage rolls every time you attack with a weapon. It's still pretty freaking useful. When you get to 3rd level, you get Elemental Weapon, which does the same thing as Magic Weapon, but it also adds a D4 of elemental damage. Super, super useful for a melee ranger. And if you combine that with the Favored Foe that doesn't require concentration and doesn't get lost if somebody hits you, you have a really, really interesting melee ranger build that you can't really make right now. Ranger is really heavily weighted towards bow rangers. And then they also get things like they get Revivify at 3rd level and Greater Restoration at 5th level, turning them more into a very self-reliant character that could exist in the wild on their own. And then they add Dominant Beast at 4th level, which, why wasn't that there before? That screams Ranger. Making an animal my friend? Come on, folks. The other thing you get is additional fighting style options. They added a bunch of new fighting style options. Fighters get almost every one of them. However, there is a particular fighting style that I believe only Rangers get. I might be wrong. Correct me in the comments if I am. And that is Druidic Warrior, which lets you learn 2 cantrips of your choice from the Druid spell list. They count as ranger spells. You use Wisdom. And whenever you gain a level in this class, you can replace one of those cantrips with another cantrip from the Druid spell list. This is super, super useful. And again, really starts moving you towards that idea of a nature-based warrior. Now they have natural inborn magic that they can just always use. And some of them are going to be, kind of situation. Like Create Bonfire would be a great cantrip for a ranger to have, because in the middle of a situation, being able to just magically make a bonfire appear is really useful. But there's other things like Magic Stone, which gives you the ability to just pick up rocks and use them as pretty damn good weapons. Or, and Magic Stone will actually help in a different way if you could take multiple fighting styles, which you can't in this particular way, but we'll talk about feats in another video. Or my personal favorite one, Shillelagh. Shillelagh lets you take a staff or a club and turn it into a D8 weapon that is magical and uses your wisdom score instead of your strength to attack. This actually builds the way for playing a melee ranger that doesn't need to max their dexterity. Every ranger, doesn't matter if you're bow or melee, you're going to max your dexterity first, because it gives you higher armor class, and more importantly, it helps you do more damage, which you desperately need, since none of the other abilities of the ranger help you do that in any meaningful way. This would allow you to focus on your wisdom, which would mean you'd maximize things like your survival, your ability to track things, your insight, your perception, which really feels very rangery, but still be able to make attacks pretty well. Now, the one limiting factor of Shillelagh is it's not concentration, which is just super useful. The spell ends if you cast it again or you let go of the weapon. But it's a bonus action to cast. So even a dual wielding ranger could have a really good wisdom score. All their main hand attacks would be with their shillelagh, which is a magic weapon that uses their wisdom. And then their offhand attacks could still be a dagger or scimitar or something that they use dex for. But they have enough other uses of their bonus action for things like Searing Smite and to kind of make up for the difference. They could use elemental weapons or things like that. Like, there's so many ways you could build this really cool dual weapon fighter, and be able to use shillelagh as a way to do that. Another really fun cantrip is Thorn Whip, which is just fun. You create a whip. You hit a target with the whip. You pull it towards you. And it does the damage. Like, how cool is that? Especially, again, as a melee ranger, if you can't get close enough to an enemy, or an enemy is running away from you, Thorn Whip them back. You do a little bit of damage. It looks really cool. You lose out on your extra attack, and you lose out on your bonus action attack, but you gain control aspects. You gain the ability to move an enemy and reach enemies that are outside of your reach, and it's just cool to have a Thorn Whip you can use. So, the Druidic Warrior, I think, is one of the coolest fighting styles. In addition to that, if you don't want to do Druidic Warrior, you have Blind Fighting, which gives you blind sight for 10 feet. And we talked about this in one of my other ones because they worded it kind of weird. But they do specifically say you can see an invisible creature within that range unless the creature successfully hides from you, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you need something obscuring you to hide from you, but whatever. So blind fighting can be really good, but it is a bit of a niche one. Would be very beneficial for like an Underdark campaign where you don't have dark vision, or a campaign where you're having to deal with magical darkness on a fairly regular basis. Like, if you have a Shadow Monk on your team, your Shadow Monk could cast darkness on a pebble or something like that. You could pick it up and go forward and just attack people, being effectively invisible with that. So, yeah. And then the other fighting style is Thrown Weapon Fighting, which I really like. It effectively allows you... you can draw a weapon that is a thrown property as part of the attack you make with the weapon, which it just means that you can use extra to attack and like offhand attacks to throw things like daggers. And in addition, when you hit with a ranged attack using a thrown weapon, you get +2 bonus to the damage roll. So thrown weapon fighting, if you're Critical Role fans, dagger would definitely be a thrown weapon fighting style kind of thing. And would work so super well. So I like the thrown weapon fighting. If you could combine that with Magic Stone, which you don't get as a ranger, since you would need to do Druidic Warrior. If you had a Druid in your party and they just keep creating Magic Stones, each Magic Stone each cast creates 3 Magic Stones that you can throw with an action, and it would be a ranged throw. Yeah, so everything like that is pretty cool. An additional thing you get is a Spellcasting Focus. Rangers technically, I believe, don't have a quote-unquote Spellcasting Focus with their spellcasting feature. Yeah, they don't get the option of using a Spellcasting Focus, meaning any material components, or they don't list it here specifically. So any material components you would have to have on you. I think that might be one of the reasons why this Ranger spell list was so limited before, because I'm thinking they were probably mostly verbal and somatic spells, so they wouldn't have to use a spell focus. Tasha's just adds the option of allowing you to use Druid focuses for Ranger spells, which is just mechanic stuff that's just as useful. Third level, which this is already getting pretty long, but I'm going to kind of just go through this because I want to get this all in one big long video. Don't worry, there will be timestamps, so if you need to watch this in multiple parts, you can. All right, so Primal Awareness, which replaces Primeval Awareness for the Ranger. Primeval Awareness was a third level ability, which was you used an action and used a Ranger spell slot to basically see what was around you. For a minute per level of the spell slot you expend, you can sense whether the following types of creatures are present within a mile of you, or within 6 miles if you're in your favorite terrain. So another almost useful thing. And you can choose some aberrations, celestials, dragons, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead. This feature doesn't reveal the creature's location or numbers. So it's literally just go, hey, does it feel like dragons are around here? And the ranger goes, yeah, I kind of feel like there's dragons around. Really? Yeah, I definitely feel like there's dragons around. Well, damn, where are they? No idea. They're kind of around. Well, how close are they? Within about 6 miles. So we might not see them for hours. Well, but they're here, man. And we may never see them if, they go in a different direction because they're 6 miles away. But they're here, man. Like, it's a useless ability. And it burns an action plus a spell slot. Primal Awareness is a feature that they added to a bunch of other classes, which is basically when you pick your subclass, you get additional spells you can know. Primal Awareness are just spells that you always know, and you always have prepared as a ranger. So you get Speak with Animals, Beast Sense, Speak with Plants, Locate Creature, and Commune with Nature. All of these are like textbook ranger kind of spells. I like it. It gives the ranger more uses for their spell slots, which again, most rangers nowadays only use spell slots for Hunter's Mark. That's it. That's all they ever use it for. So now they have uses for their spell slots, which is nice. And it doesn't punish you in any way, which a lot of ranger abilities, as we've already seen here, punish you at the same time as they give you something. Again, favored foe is that exact the thing. Every time you gain something with a ranger, like favored foe, you lose something, like your ability to use Hunter's Mark, a defining feature of your class. I'm really upset about foe, favored foe, if you guys hadn't guessed. So that's Primal Awareness. I like it. I think it's better than Primeval Awareness. I've had a few Rangers in games I've played. I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen players use this. In my own campaigns, in Adventures League games, it just never is useful. And I can count on a single finger the number of times it actually gave them useful information. And I wouldn't need that finger to count because it's been 0. So Primal Awareness, I'm totally good with that, replacing Primeval Awareness. Martial Versatility is an optional ability, an optional feature that I think every class that gets a fighting style choice can use, which is anytime you get an ability score improvement or a feat, you can replace a fighting style with a different one. It's just nice. If you pick a fighting style, again, you pick your fighting style at 2nd level. When you get to 8th level, you may have realized, wow, I don't play this character like that at all. And I'm really feeling like I have to, like it's a chore for me to use the fighting style I chose. Great, switch it. I don't think it causes any issues whatsoever to allow players to switch their fighting style within reason, and this is a perfect way to do that. The last optional feature that they add is Nature's Veil, which replaces Hide in Plain Sight. Hide in Plain Sight was another ability that just didn't make sense. Hide in Plain Sight was a 10th level ability, so it was a relatively powerful. The really good abilities start at level 11, because you can't have two level 11 abilities from two different classes, because level max is at 20. So once you hit level 11, those are when the abilities really start getting crazy. However, 10th level abilities generally tend to be relatively powerful, because in order to get two of them, you have to completely split down the middle two classes 50-50. And you can't get both of them until level to 20. So it should be a pretty good ability. Hide in Plain Sight is you can spend a minute creating camouflage for yourself. You must have access to fresh mud, dirt, plants, soot, and other naturally occurring materials with which to camouflage yourself. Once you're camouflaged, you can try to hide by pressing yourself up against a solid surface, such as a tree or a wall, that is at least as tall and wide as you are. You get a +1 bonus to dexterity stealth checks as long as you remain there without moving or taking actions. Once you move or take an action or a reaction, you must camouflage yourself again to gain this benefit. So literally, if you waste a minute camouflaging yourself, you can find a place to hide completely motionless and useless until you move, after which you got to do it all over again. And what does it give you? A +10 to your stealth check. +10's a lot. You know what else gives you a +10 to your stealth check? Pass without a trace, which is a hunter spell. Or, I'm sorry, which is a ranger spell. It's a really useful ranger spell. I'm looking it up here just to make sure I'm not misremembering it, because I hate doing stuff like that. Starts with P. Dear Lord, they've added all the new spells you gain access to in here. Oh, it's because I freaking drew it on. Anyway, it's a second level ranger spell. It's another thing that tends to be somewhat defining of a ranger, but because why am I not seeing this? Dear Lord, why is this so hard? There it is. It is. It is something that only druids and rangers get as part of their class spells, and then the trickery domain also will get access to the spell. Monks, shadow monks, can cast it as part of their shadow arts. But it is kind of a ranger thing. I don't know a lot of druids that take it, because they have so many other spells they can use. So generally, unless you have a shadow monk or a ranger in your party, you're not getting pass without a trace. And I see rangers use it a lot more than shadow monks, because monks aren't that popular. Hide in Plain Sight, literally you can get the same benefit using an action which takes 6 seconds and lasts for an hour, as many times as you want to use it, as long as you're concentrating. Or you can spend a minute for a single stealth check that you're not allowed to move at all in, and as soon as you move, you have to spend another minute doing it. Hide in Plain Sight is another worthless ability for the ranger. Nature's Veil, on the other hand, is really interesting. As a bonus action, you can magically become invisible along with any equipment you are wearing or carrying until the start of your next turn. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, get all of them back on a long rest. That is super useful. And it's something that can be useful for both the bow ranger and the dual-wielding ranger. But I gotta say, as someone that plays a dual-wielding ranger and has to worry about concentration for their hunter's marks so they can keep pace with the other fighters in the field, this is super great. because it says you become invisible. Not that you cast the invisibility spell, you become invisible, meaning you can make attacks, any the thing you want, and no one can see you, which is effectively giving you advantage on all of your attack rolls, unless you're fighting someone with blind sight or tremor sensor somewhere where they could see through invisibility. Or this could be completely defensive, where you make your attacks, you use your bonus action, turn invisible, and you get away from the enemy and hide. And due to the fact they can't see you, especially if you're wearing something like elven boots, I think they're called. I can't remember exactly what they're called, but they're boots that make you not make any sound when you walk. You can just disappear, go away. When your turn starts again, you appear, make your attacks, and disappear again. Or again, do the disappearing right at the start of your turn and get advantage on your attack rolls. Like, Nature's Veil is such a useful ability. As far as fitting within the theme of Ranger, this one I think is a slight bit of a stretch. But again, the Ranger is so underpowered that giving it an ability that no other class can do, that's super unique just to the Ranger, and gives them an actual benefit, not only for bow rangers who already have it pretty darn good, because most of the spells are built for bow rangers, but this works really well for melee rangers and is just a cool feature. Yeah. Those are the optional class features for the Ranger. Again, the purpose of these class features, and it's one of the unique things about the Ranger. Ranger is the only class that gets optional class features that replace other features into Tasha's guide, other than the cleric, and they only get it for one optional class feature, and that's because it technically combines two different class features that you get normally with different subclasses. I'll explain that better when I talk about clerics and Tasha's. But Ranger is the only class, other than that one cleric ability, that actually replaces features. So this was done to fix the mistakes they made with the Ranger. And for the most part, it works really well. The Ranger that uses these optional class features is actually competitive with other weapon-based classes in the game. It feels unique with the fact that it has a built-in swimming speed. It can give itself temporary hit points. Favored foe needs work. But the Druidic Warrior fighting style, the Primal awareness spells, and then Nature's Veil, it makes the Ranger actually a unique character to play that you can't replicate by, just playing a dex-based fighter with maybe a feat or a multi-class or two. I like it. Like I said, my only issue with it is the favored foe needs to be modified. They need to take away the concentration, and they need to let you bounce it between targets. Just those tiny two changes, while keeping everything else, turns it into a really cool, really uniquely Ranger the thing, and a defining feature of the class. Other than that, I love everything about the optional features. Any Ranger, I have a multi-class Ranger. It's a Ranger Barbarian, which is interesting. But I have a multi-class Ranger in one of my campaigns. I'm 100% going to let them use these optional features. The other optional features, again, I'll talk about them in other videos. But effectively, my players are going to have to earn those optional features to be able to use them. These are just, no, you use these because it turns the Ranger into something that's actually useful and actually unique, instead of kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, that even the jack of all trades aspect is kind of weak and pathetic. I think this fixes so much of what was wrong with the Ranger. I really want to see subclasses that are built around favored foe instead of a favorite enemy, which none of the subclasses ever dealt with a favorite enemy whatsoever. Which is another thing that's really weird, because generally your defining features of the class should show up somewhere in the subclass, and they don't in anything. Yeah, I think that's really, really nice. One last thing that I'm not going to cover here, because we have some pretty cool new subclasses that I'm going to do in a separate video. They do make an optional rule for Beastmaster companions, but because that is something that deals with a subclass instead of the base Ranger class, like I said, I'll cover that when I cover the Rangers as subclasses in other videos. So, sorry this is a long one, but this is a really, really complicated topic. My other optional class ones will be significantly shorter, but that's going to be all for me today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Lets me know you liked it. It lets YouTube know you like it. And it lets YouTube know that you think other people will like it as well. So it shows them that. Also, hit the subscribe button with Tasha's guide, or Tasha's Cauldron of Everything out now. I'm going to be putting out a lot of content as quick as my mental health will allow me. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the videos. Also hit the bell to be notified anytime I put out a new video, because sometimes I put them out at odd hours because, again, my mental health is not kind to me. So this way you make sure that if it comes out at an odd hour, you're still not missing it, even if you are subscribed. In the comments below, I really want to know, what are you guys' thoughts on these new changes to the Ranger? Does this sound exciting to you? Do you want to play a Ranger like this? Do you have different opinions on favorite foe? Do you think I'm overreacting to it? Do you think I'm underreacting? Do you think it's a travesty that we should burn all the books in existence? Don't do that. No. Burn books is bad. Bad. No burn book. Burn book, bad. Read book, good. Burn book, bad. Yeah, let me know in the comments below. What do you think of this new version of the Ranger? And do you want to create a Ranger now because you saw that? Anyway, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye.